And my whole intention to this video is not to teach an old dog new tricks. When you do want to test for chlorine, use on a regular basis is absolutely disgusting. Filters are on the pond to build up beneficial bacteria. How do I actually take the chlorine out of the water that I'm putting into the pond? 3-stage dechlorinator, you can't really see them because it's got a trip off switch. I've actually got two models here in front of me. Like I said, these are not available in the UK as far as I'm aware at the moment. And bosh, there we have it. It's arrived, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the snake as well. I like the idea of this, where it just sort of sits down through the middle of it, and then it starts counting down. I just wanted to tell you, when you do add chlorine to a pond, to be fair, it's been a little bit neglected. In the NT Labs Probiotic Tropical, we're going to do some fish tank cleaning, we're going to do some water testing. Is chlorine something that you worry about? It's part of the reason why I run 2 pre-filters. But for the average koi keeper, if you're constantly adding in chlorine to your pond, but I do now because I've found a massive importance by it. But then that returns all the way to the side of the pond wall, back out to my trickle in, which runs 24/7, 7 days a week. And if you don't see me through a window, I'm still in the doghouse. Look out now then, bosh! Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, James the Koi Whisperer. We're going to start this video off about chlorine. Is chlorine something that you worry about? Is chlorine toxic for fish? Is it poisonous for fish? It's in tap water to keep our tap water safe for us to drink, but what does it do if you put it into a koi pond? And I'm interested to know what you guys do for taking the chlorine out of your water before you put it into your ponds. Is it something that you do? Do you think that it's necessary, that it needs to be done? I'm going to do a few tests today just because I run all of my systems through dechlorinated systems, Big Blue. That water that I'm putting into the pond 24/7, how often do I test it? I try to test it as often as I can. Do I know if chlorine's passing through the systems that I've got in place? So today we're going to have a little bit of a look, a little bit of a test, and I'm just going to show you some of the things that I do myself personally. A lot of people set these systems up on their pond, 3-stage dechlorinators, Big Blues. Well, how often do you check that the systems that you've got in place are still actually taking out the chlorine or the chloramine before you put it into your koi pond? Is it something that you actually think about doing? Today we're going to run through some tests and see how we get on. I just wanted to tell you, when you do add chlorine to a pond, that can create you a whole game of problems, because a lot of people experience adding chlorine to a pond by doing their weekly maintenance, by adding their water changes that they do on a weekly maintenance, that they take out 10 or 20% of water and then they top up with straight tap water. And what that can do, when you put it into the pond, your fish really do not like the chlorine. You can start seeing signs of the fish flicking and flashing, and a lot of people just think that the koi are acting up, that there's something wrong with the water quality, or there's something wrong with the fish, or there's something parasite related because my fish don't normally do it, but they're flicking and flashing. Well, a number one key point for any koi keeper out there is that the water that you add to your pond, you need to make sure that you remove all of the chlorine from that water before you add it to the pond, because the chlorine burns the fish's gills and skin and they really don't like it. And the reason why they flick and flash is because they don't want to be in that environment where they're living, because there's such high volumes of chlorine that's in the water that they can't handle, because it's not supposed to be in there for fish. You ask yourself, how do I actually take the chlorine out of the water that I'm putting into the pond? Well, there's several ways of doing it. You can use liquid form like this, which is a dechlorinator that conditions tap water from NT Labs. You can also use a 3-stage dechlorinator in the back, followed by a Big Blue, which is full of activated carbon. Being on the platform base where I'm at, I get to speak to so many different koi keepers, fish keepers in the hobby, and I hear so many different stories of what people do. I mean, years and years ago, people used to tell you that if you ran your water through a hose pipe and sprayed it into the air, that would remove all of the chlorines from the water before it entered your pond. And it's what they did 25 years ago, 20 years ago. But those days have changed, and it's come a long way really since those days. And I do believe there's still people out there that that's the way they do take chlorine out of their pond. Me, myself personally, when I first got into the hobby, I used to use a liquid-based dechlorinator. I just used to whack a little bit in, thinking that I've read what it says on the bottle, then that must mean that my water's safe for my fish. I put my fish into the pond. Do I actually test it to see if there's still chlorine in there or chloramines in the water? Well, I never used to, but I do now because I've found a massive importance by it. It also depends if you're the koi keeper that runs a trickle in 24/7, or if you only do your water changes once a week and you only change the amount of water that's in your filter. And for what I'm about to show you, the way that I take my chlorine out of the pond, it's not saying that it's necessary and it's the only way to do it, but I found a massive benefit in using this system. So for the people that don't know what this system is, it's a 3-stage dechlorinator. So as your water comes directly out of your tap water supply, it runs through the first stage of the dechlorination system, and this is pretty much like a pre-filter, a sediment chamber. I'll show you all the cartridge blocks today because I need to replace mine after I run a test, but it runs through a sequence of filtered cartridges, which then runs through another pre-filter, and then it runs down to the bottom of this big blue, and it runs through all the way up through the carbon. And there is different types of carbon that you need depending where you live. You can get activated carbon, bone char carbon. Depending where you live, you might need to use a different type of carbon to take out the chlorine. But then that returns all the way to the side of the pond wall, back out to my trickle in, which runs 24/7, 7 days a week. But that water that's running in 7 days a week, 24/7, how often do I test it to make sure that the systems that I've got in place isn't actually bypassing and still adding chlorine to my system without me even realising, because I think that I've got a system in place that's taking all of that out? Well, what I'm about to show you is a test that we can prove to see what chlorine is running in the system. And I, for one, am certainly not saying that every koi keeper needs to invest in a test kit to test for chlorine. I'm just saying this is what I'm using myself personally so I can get a result. And I also do know there's other ways of testing for chlorine. You can go onto eBay, buy yourself some DPD number 4 tablets, and then what that will allow you to do is drop the tablets into your water sample that you're testing for. If that water turns pink, then you know full well there's chlorine in your pond, or there's chlorine bypassing the system that you're using. But the other way of doing it, or the best way of doing it, is to have a figure knowing exactly how much ppm is actually being bypassed your system, and anything over 20 parts per million chlorine is toxic to fish. When you do want to test for chlorine, it's so simple to test. You do have to buy the actual samples to go into the glass test tubes to get a reading. You get a few with the item when you first purchase it. Obviously, like anything, it runs out, so you buy these little reagents separately, and then I sort of run a test once every 2 or 3 weeks just to make sure where I'm at. But I'm going to run you through how I'm going to do the test today. So to start with, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take 10 mils water sample, which I'm trickling into the pond at the moment, and then that will give me a result to see if I'm bypassing any of my cartridge blocks in, seeing if I need to replace any of the filter cartridges that's running through the system in the filter shed. This is how simple it is. You press C1, it gives you a reading of just the pond water itself. Then what you do, you take this little sachet out, add yourself your reagent, then you add this reagent into your bottle, then you put this back inside, you close the lid, you press C2, and then it starts counting down. So now it should start giving us the result of the total chlorine. Hopefully it's 0. And that means there is no chlorine bypassing my system. Happy days. But that's not to say that this system will never fail, because if I don't check it and test it, I'm not to know. But there's certain things that I like to do myself personally on my system to prolong the life of the carbon, because the carbon inside of this big blue is very expensive. For me to refill that cost me around 200 quid worth of activated carbon. So what I do on a regular basis is replace the cartridge blocks inside of the 3-stage filter, because as you can see in front of you, these little guys here only cost roughly around 15 to 20 pound, depending where you get them from. And the way I see it, if I remove most of the chlorine before it actually goes into the big blue by taking out these cartridge blocks once every 6 months, I find that it prolongs the life of the carbon inside of there, and it's much cheaper for me to replace these 3 cartridge blocks, as you can see over here, and it's super easy for me to change these, which I find it prolongs the life of the carbon into there. So if I remove most of the heavy metals and chlorine before it even gets to there, in my eyes it means that there doesn't take so much of a hit, and it means that I just replace these on a little bit more of a regular basis, 3 months, 6 months, depending how much water that you trickle into your system. And that's another story as well, how fast that you trickle in your system, how fast you trickle in your fresh water running through these dechlorinated systems. Because I've found over the years, if you try pumping that water in too quickly, then in theory you don't let the system do the job that it needs to be done. I mean, there is some people saying that they can run their tap flat out and they don't get no chlorine, but me myself personally, the slower that you can run it on a 24/7 basis, that the better results that you get by making sure you're taking out as much of those heavy metals as possible, and you're also removing as much as that chlorine as possible with a slow constant trickle every day of the week than what you are trying to top up once at the end of the week. You get home from work, you've cleaned your filters, you're in a bit of a mad rush, you whack the tap on full blast, you're running it through a dechlorinated system, but you're running it through at a much faster rate than what you should do. You're better off really to clean your filters, and then if you're doing the once a week game, you're better to put it on in the morning and then go and turn it off in the evening instead of trying to do it in like 2 hours or something stupid like that. And for how quick this is to change, it does come supplied with these chuck keys. You can just turn them over. I'm going to get all of these replaced now, get the new ones put in, and I want to show you how dirty these, well, especially the first stage is. This is water that we drink. If you're seeing this how I'm seeing it, you'll probably never want to drink tap water again. But this is 3 months of use, 3 months of running. This is what a clean one looks like, a brand spanking new one. And this is filtered down to 5 microns. So there's barely little that bypasses this system with the heavy metals and clay and bits and pieces that's in the water. You can see my hands are quite clean here at the moment. If I just touch this on the outside, how thick and mucky this is with actual basically crap which is in our tap water that we drink and we, you know, we eat with, we drink with, we use on a regular basis. It's absolutely disgusting. And you can even see that at 5 microns it does slowly, after a period of time, it does try to get in through the system itself, and some of it does bypass and it goes through the system. It's part of the reason why I run 2 pre-filters before it runs into my pond. But that's disgusting, and we drink this, so taking this out of your pond, it gives you that little bit of an advantage as well, I believe. And you can even see the comparison of the second stage of the pre-filter, where this has got a different sort of removable item inside of it. And you can also see how clogged up that is down inside of there, which from a brand new one, the difference of after it's past that first 5 micron stage. So I recommend replace all 3 of your cartridge blocks on a regular basis. And even on the 3rd stage, you can really see the comparison difference between a brand new one and one that's been in use. And I mean, just by me picking up that water, I don't know if you can see that, but the colour of that water coming out of there is absolutely disgusting. So it's part of the reason why, you know, I keep banging on about it, but replace these and it prolongs the life of your big blues. And after they've been replaced, it's just a case of a nice slow trickling going into the system, holding your hand on the top to remove any of the air out of the system. That might be not picking up on the sound because I've got my mics on, but if you slowly trickle it in, remove the air out of the system, and then, to be honest with you, you're back up and running. One thing I do recommend, if you're using one of these systems on its own, the last stage with the carbon in it, sometimes they do recommend to run that for around 2 or 3 minutes so it doesn't go into your pond. But I know that it's going through another pre-filter and into the carbon here, so any of that will get trapped into here and trapped into here before it goes to the pond anyway. But yeah, just a slow little trickle in, removing that air before it runs through the system, and then you'll be back up and running. And my whole intention to this video is not to teach an old dog new tricks. My intention to this video is to teach new koi keepers to the hobby, koi keepers that want to enjoy the hobby a little bit more without any problems or issues, or even eradicating those issues. Because in this hobby, what you'll find, the first time that you got problems with any fish is generally down to the water. The water is the key of this hobby, and if you can remove all of the things possible in certain situations to save you getting any problems, i.e. taking chlorine out of your water before you put it into your pond, then you can eradicate that out of the system when you may occur to have a problem with your fish. Whether that be if your fish are flicking and flashing, well, you know full well that if you've got no chlorine in the system, then you know that the chlorine's not the issue. So then you can tick that off the box and move on to the next thing, going down through the list to work out what may be the problem in your pond to start with. But the number one key in this hobby is the water. And the water that you're trickling into your pond on a regular basis is generally the key and the answer to everything. Because like they say in this hobby, and it's easier said than done, that we don't keep fish, we keep water. But understanding and learning the water that you're putting into your pond, it does play one hell of a part of this hobby. So, like I said a minute ago, I think the people out there that already know this and they already got the information behind it, they've already been taught by somebody else. But there's so many people out there in this hobby that do not remove chlorine and don't even think that that's an issue that they have to remove the chlorine. Well, me myself personally, I'm so passionate about it at the moment. I'm not telling every koi keeper out there that you need to go and buy a Big Blue, a 3-stage dechlorinator. But what I am saying is, there's no point going and spending 200 or 300, 400, 500 pound on a koi and then getting problems because you haven't got other systems sat in place to make your whole experience of the hobby that little bit more enjoyable for you. I always look at it in the way of, if you had a house that was leaking water, that you wouldn't go and buy a 50-inch TV screen and let it get wet, because you know that that's going to happen and you know full well that that TV is going to break. So I always recommend, with the fish keeping hobby, get your home sat right or the pond sat right, and then go and spend your money on your fish afterwards. So many people in the hobby, they go out and build a pond, next thing you know, straight down the koi dealer, they're buying 5 or 6 fish at once, spending crazy amounts of money, and they don't even take chlorine out of their pond. They didn't even know that they had to take chlorine out of the pond. So hopefully that this video plays a little bit of a education video of the reasons behind taking the chlorine out. And one thing I wanted to add as well, for the people that thinking, what is the main reason why I don't take chlorine out of the pond or put chlorine into the pond? What that does? Well, it burns the fish's gills, it burns the fish's skin, but not only that, as a lot of you know, you've got to keep filters on a pond. The reasons why we keep filters on a pond is not to keep the water just clear so we can visibly see the fish. Filters are on the pond to build up beneficial bacteria. But for the average koi keeper, if you're constantly adding in chlorine to your pond, well, the reasons why chlorine is added to the tap water that supplying your pond is so it makes it healthy for us to drink. It makes it healthy for us to use as a human. Well, what that does, it also kills beneficial bacteria and it also kills bad bacteria. By adding chlorine to a filter system to a pond, you never ever build up beneficial bacteria in your filter, because every time you do your weekly maintenance and you're adding fresh water in there, that chlorine will go and attack your beneficial bacteria, and it's like starting a new pond up all of the time. You never actually get any advantages of having the filters to start with. You might be removing a bit of the solid muck, but you don't ever build up any biological bacteria. Biological stage is where the water gets crystal clear. And moving on from all of that, when I say gets crystal clear, there's other things that can help you along that line as well. With, if your pond's in full sunlight, there's certain things that you need to use, like UV bulbs. Not that green water is a problem for fish, but the reason why we don't like green water is down to the fact you can't see your fish to start with. And it's part of the reason why a lot of us use UVs. My UVs on this pond is actually built into my drum filter, which is supplied there and there. I currently run 2 UVs on my main pond. You can't really see them because it's got a trip off switch for when I lift the lid on this drum filter, but you can see the bulbs down there. There's one either side, and what that does, it helps keep the bile build up off of the drum screen itself. There's loads of different types of UVs on the market. Some people put like an inline UV, that is a heater, may I add, but you can put like an inline UV in your system. But one thing I'm getting to is the UVs that you see behind me now. These aren't currently available in the UK at the moment. I wanted to show you what they're like and the reasons behind why I've got them, because I do think there's a lot of people out there that make DIY filters, and I thought myself personally, when these UVs do land from Mountain Tree, they do land in the UK, I think they'll be very handy for people to have a look at if you ever do build like a DIY filter system. Let's unbox it, show you what it looks like, for the pure fact of I think it can slip into any sort of unit, and I had a little bit of an idea where else it can sort of slip into, like a lot of keepers do these days, where you don't fit a purge line, you fit a rodding point. You could quite easily fit this UV in the top of a rodding point like this, which in theory would make it super easy to change the bulbs, because a lot of other equipment UV bulbs that I've seen, you know, sometimes they're a little bit tricky to replace the bulbs. Part of the reason why people don't do it. So let's get this unboxed, show you what it is, and yeah, I'm just happy to show you, because new when I get to my koi studio that I'm planning to fit some in place and get them up and running and give them a full test down to a point. So I've actually got 2 models here in front of me. Like I said, these are not available in the UK as far as I'm aware at the moment. They are from Mountain Tree. I'm not sure if it's a new product that they're making or if it's just because of customs why they can't get to the UK. I mean, I did get collared in customs with both of these, and I did have to pay the import tax on it. Not that that's a problem, because I wanted to show you guys what's what and what they're all about, because I thought they were quite a unique design and I've not seen them before. So let's get them out, show you what it's all about, and yeah, I think we should just crack right on with the UV. Bosh. So yeah, taking a look inside of the box, mine has actually got a spare replacement bulb, just because in case the transport with this bulb broke, but I had no issues with it. I know I've got that same issue with my plug socket in the UK, so hopefully when they do land in the UK that the plugs will be according to the UK plugs, whether that be possible or not. But the reasons why I like the idea of it, the design of this, comes in a stainless steel sort of protected cage for the bulb, so you can pretty much house this anywhere you like. And then let's just get it all out and I'll show you what it looks like. Right then, so the reasons why I want to show you this, because I think people in the UK, a lot of people in the UK do custom build DIY filters and stuff like that, and adding a UV bulb to a custom built filter could be something a little bit unique, I think. And this is an item that would allow you to do that. So it's literally got a removable floating sort of panel on the top, which you don't have to use it if you don't want to, but that will allow it to float on top of your filter if it's in your last stage of your filtering, or even if you put it in your first stage of filtering. What I like about it, how easy it is to replace the bulb, like the stainless steel cage on the outside. It comes with plenty of cable. Like I said, Mountain Tree themselves might have to sort something out for the plug socket for when it comes to the UK, but I know there's a lot of other companies out there. I'm not going to name them, but you probably know when you buy a pump or a UV that you have to add your own plug to it anyway. So yeah, I think it's just a cracking idea. So at the moment, as far as I'm aware, they come in 20 watt and 40 watt. I was going to test it out in my grow-on pond when I first originally built that pond, but because I put a drum on it, I've got a UV running up through the drum. It's only a 10 watt, and I think that honestly that's been man enough for the size pond. But when I get to the farm studio, when I plan to custom build some filters myself, I'm certainly thinking about adding this in. I like the idea of this, where it just sort of sits down through the middle of it. You can sort of float this somewhere. And the UV, down to a point, it does really only eradicate the green water side of things. It also can help keep parasite problems down and bad bacteria problems down. That ain't its main goal. That's more of a sterilising bulb. But this UV bulb certainly is impressive. I like the way it looks. It looks smart, looks clean, looks tidy. And the main advantage of it, what I believe myself personally, is that you can easily replace the bulb when it needs to be replaced. But yeah, that's enough of that. I'm not going to actually fit it on my pond today, but I just wanted to show you that Mountain Tree are always coming up with new ideas and new products. So something else I wanted to add to this video. But all that said, I wanted to take you in and show you my fish tank, because I've got to do a little bit of cleaning on that today. Yeah, I've got to do a bit of maintenance on my fish tanks before I go to Japan. To be fair, it's been a little bit neglected. I've been a bit busy and I haven't done any maintenance for a little while. I have got my water in here as well. I get that the night before, leave it inside, and then just bring that up to temperature because I get it from my dechlorinated system outside. I have been feeding these fish on the NT Labs Probiotic Tropical. Found it's a very good quality food as well. Highly recommend that if you've not tested it out already. This tank's doing fantastic. The neon tank, the Lost World tank as we call it. But I've got a bit of detritus built up on it. So I'm going to give it a bit of a spring clean, tidy it up a little bit. I do like all the algae build up on the rocks itself. I do think it looks sort of a little bit more natural, so I'm not going to remove all of that. I do like the look of that. I'm just going to clean it all off the glass, give it a bit of a clean up. The plant itself still growing fantastic on the top. I do prune it back now and then, take out some of the bigger leaves. Some of the leaves I get occasionally that just go a little bit brown on the end. To be honest with you, it's still doing fantastic, the lily plant that's in there. And I do believe that it makes this water really, really healthy for the fish. And bosh, there we have it. I've done a bit of de-weeding with some of the plants that needed sorting out. It's really hard for me to film, guys, because of the glare here, but yeah, super impressed with that. So that's that all sorted, ready for me to go to Japan now, I suppose. But I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the snake as well, because to be honest with you, I'm not disrespecting the people that keep reptiles, but since we've owned this thing, I've only really seen it about 4 times. I don't know where it lives or what it does, and I don't really get the idea of it. At least with fish, it gives you something to look at and you can enjoy the sound of the running water and the fish himself. Do you know what I'm saying? But all that yibbity yabbada said, all in this video, for the people that do follow me, well, from the last time when I ordered myself a heat pump, it's arrived. Well, I think I'm going to be in trouble with Mrs. Whisperer because I didn't expect this to come until I come back from Japan. But it's turned up already. Yeah, on that note, guys, I think I'm going to have to hide this heat pump. Or, to be honest, Mrs. Whisperer knows that I've got it. I did tell her that it's not going to turn up until I got back from Japan. What am I going to do? She's going to have my pants down, all right? That being said, if I don't see you in a week, I'll see you for a window. And if you don't see me for a window, I'm still in the doghouse. Look out now then. Bosh.